Welcome to Democracy Does, the Civic Power Playbook, a podcast that cuts through the noise to explain what's really happening in our democracy. Each episode breaks down key issues with insight from policy experts and change makers, giving you clear tips to take action. Whether you're fired up or feeling stuck, you're in the right place to get informed and get inspired, because democracy works best when we all participate. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Democracy Does, the Civic Power Playbook. I'm adding this bonus episode of my conversation with Professor Severin Borenstein because we got into such a great conversation about so many things involving gas prices, oil prices, and energy. I was talking to him about how different events can really impact us on our wallets and our day-to-day. Therefore, we kind of sidetracked and got into a conversation about energy and energy bills and how that's really hitting people hard. So I wanted to include you in our conversation. Take a listen. Hope you enjoy it. One of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because one of your specialties is the economics of renewable energy and economic policy. I was dying to ask you about this because one of the things that's been in the news a lot is West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, certain places across the country are seeing a surge in their electric bills. And now that coal plants have been turned back on, there's a correlation between that. Can you just talk to me about why that is happening?
Yeah, there are a lot of factors driving electricity prices, and they differ locationally. So California's seen a huge increase. The Northeast has seen a huge increase. The Mid-Atlantic is seeing a big increase. The Ohio, Kentucky, Pennsylvania area is part of what's called the PJM, because it started with Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland.
Yes.
Interconnect. And they've seen an increase because they have seen a big increase in demand while they have seen much less increase in supply for a variety of complicated reasons about the way they have incentivized building new generation. It hasn't really caught up. And as a result, when you have less supply and more demand, the wholesale price of electricity has been going up. That is a big factor. What's also a factor, I do have to point out, particularly from my perch in California, where our prices are twice as high as in those areas have pretty low priced electricity. So to begin with, the price increase, which is probably 2 or 3 cents a kilowatt hour, is a big part. If you started at 15 cents a kilowatt hour, if you started at 35 or 40, as in California, then it wouldn't be as big a chunk, but it's a shock. Now, those are also areas that use a lot more electricity. The summers require a lot of air conditioning, and more every year with climate change. And the winters, they generally are not heating with electricity, but even if you're heating with natural gas, the electricity component of that is significant because that's what runs the fan that moves the heat through your house. So they are getting hit by wholesale price increases. Other parts of the country are dealing with increases that are a response to things that are happening to them due to climate change.
Like what?
In California, we have wildfires, and actually now all along the West Coast, and actually in Oklahoma recently, they had a major wildfire, and these have gotten a lot worse with climate change. So they are having to put in new technologies to reduce the wildfire risk around electric lines, and those get added into rates. I'm a believer they shouldn't, that the state should handle them as an emergency expense, but that's not what they do. They add them into rates, which is essentially a tax on electricity, which is a really regressive tax. Like low income use a much higher share of their income on electricity. Yesterday, I think it was, or day before yesterday, there was a massive storm in Michigan that took down a lot of their distribution lines. Those storms are getting more powerful. We know about the hurricanes in the southeast that are wiping out more of their grids. So in many places, they have to rebuild it, but in other parts, they're undergrounding.
Mhm.
Undergrounding is super expensive. It's definitely not as cheap as just putting up poles and wires. And so they are having to rebuild their grids, and they're adding that into the price of electricity.
But undergrounding seems like it's a much wiser way to protect, the grid, so to speak, from natural disasters, right?
Yep. In some cases, it is. There can be drawbacks when you have a fault. It's harder to fix it because
Yeah.
it's you got to dig things up. But yeah, the question is how much more it costs,
Yes.
and it turns out it costs a lot more.
Yeah.
It still can be the best solution in some cases, but there are other solutions. In most of the country, the distribution lines are not insulated.
Mhm.
They just are raw wires,
Exposed.
and that means when a tree falls on them, it causes a spark,
Mm.
and so one solution is to insulate the wires.
Mhm.
In parts of the country, and California is doing this, there are new technologies that shut off the power very quickly, so quickly that if a wire gets hit by a tree and falls, by the time it hits the ground, it's already de-energized,
Mm.
and that's a way to prevent fires.
Wow.
So fires are one problem. Stronger hurricanes and winter weather is a problem. In Texas, we saw that in 2022, or 2021, Winter Storm Uri, which
Yes.
took out their grid
Ice storm.
and caused over 200 deaths. So they are dealing with extreme weather, and doing that means changing the way they build electric grids
Mhm.
and generation, and that means more expense.
But I
So
also
we are seeing energy prices go up. I will tell you the one piece of good news here
what is it?
is that generation costs are going down.
Generation
So
cost, what is that? What do you mean by that?
the cost of producing electricity from wind power, from solar power, the cost of batteries to store it, because wind and solar don't produce when nature doesn't allow them to. Cost of natural gas has gotten cheaper. All the things we use to produce electricity are getting cheaper.
Right,
So
but
that
isn't that being I mean, I hate sorry to interrupt, but isn't that kind of being counterbalanced by the fact that, this administration wants to resurrect coal? A lot of these power plants from the research I read, um, these power plants are old, they require maintenance, and there are not as many programs supporting natural energy, wind, and other resources. So that's kind of getting pushed to the wayside for old, antiquated infrastructure, which is driving up the cost. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We had subsidies for actually wind and solar, but
Yes.
also for some cleaner natural gas plants and so forth.
Yes.
And a lot of those are being undermined by the current administration. We aren't seeing that effect yet
Mm-hmm.
on the wholesale prices, but I worry that if we continue with what I think is misguided policy, we will.
Mm-hmm.
We are spending money, or the federal government is forcing states to spend money to keep some power plants online
Right.
that are really not very economic, and that will add some cost. So far, that's been a pretty minor impact,
Mm-hmm.
but if we continue down this misguided road, that cost will add up. So I think but I think none of that is counterbalancing the amazing decrease we've seen in the price of solar and wind and batteries, and the very, very low prices of natural gas we are facing these days. And that's sort of an interesting aspect of the war. The price of natural gas everywhere else in the world has gone way up since the war started. But because the US has very limited interaction with natural gas, it's harder to move natural gas than oil,
Mm-hmm.
and there are limited facilities to export natural gas. So natural gas prices in the US have actually come down slightly since the war started.
Oh, wow.
So if you heat with natural gas, or if your utility uses natural gas, that's a plus. If you're particularly in the Northeast and you heat with heating oil, Luckily for consumers, the war started after the worst of the winter.
Right.
But if we were at the same level next year, where you're going to have a big shock if you're heating with heating oil.
But then, so how do you explain? I mean, you have a silver lining here, but then how do you explain, for example, the piece that I saw in the AP where the gentleman was talking about how his storefront is 650 a month in rent, but his electric bill jumped to $750 a month. So his electric bill is more than his rent.
Right. And that is not the cost of the fuel to make electricity. That is the cost of all the other components. First of all, in some cases, there isn't enough capacity around,
Okay.
like in the PJM area, and that has driven up the wholesale price of electricity because there's a capacity shortage. In some cases, there are all these additional costs being added. Some of them there are subsidy programs.
Hmm.
Some of them are the cost of dealing with climate change.
Okay.
And some of them are just an old grid.
Yeah.
The US built a lot of the grid almost 100 years ago and hasn't done as much maintenance as we probably should have. And in some areas of the country, they're dealing with replacing capital that's 100 years old and can't really wait anymore. And so
Yes.
that's ending up driving up bills.
So what can people do? Because I think a lot of people are conflicted. You hear conflicting things about what works, what doesn't. Trump, for example, says renewable energy is costly, and bringing back coal is better for the economy. Obviously, the data shows differently. Where there's damage to the environment. Um, what are people supposed to do with this information?
Oh, I think this is an area where people do have a lot of options. First of all, I think the main thing to do is to use energy more efficiently.
Uh huh.
And it's hard. There's a standard line in people among people who study electricity that the way we get billed is like going to a supermarket and having them tell you you owe $175, but you can't see the price of any of the goods in your cart because
Right.
you don't know how much electricity things use.
Right. Right.
And people often don't realize that their air conditioner is incredibly expensive to run.
Yes.
Whereas lighting these days, particularly almost everyone's using LED bulbs, is incredibly cheap.
Right.
So worry less about turning off the lights and worry more about maybe adjusting the air conditioning up a couple of degrees. That will
Yes.
save you a lot of money.
Okay.
But understanding, and I wrote a blog post about this many years ago where I went around my house and I have a little meter that will tell you how much things use. And I just wrote it up and I said, where am I using electricity? And understanding that air conditioning is a huge factor.
Mm.
An electric dryer is very expensive to run.
Oh, wow.
Line drying clothes is a big savings. Just figuring out what's actually costing you a lot.
Mm.
And there are a lot of articles about this, and I have one on my website that went around my house, but
Mhm.
everybody's house is different.
Yeah.
Um, I would also say if you are somebody who has been holding off switching to LED light bulbs, do it now.
Wow.
Those things pay for themselves, even if the current bulbs haven't burned out.
Yes.
Just throw them away and put in LED bulbs. They use so much less electricity that they pay for themselves.
Wow. Excellent. Those are excellent tips. Thank you so much, Professor Bornstein. I feel so lucky I got a 2 for 1 from you. It was really
Well, it's
great to
great
talk
to
to
be
you.
with you.
And now it's time to review Professor Borenstein's top 3 power plays. First, he says find ways to use energy more efficiently in your home. Number 2, that includes checking out how certain appliances that use high energy can be tweaked just a little bit to save you money, like your air conditioner or your dryer. And finally, he says get LED light bulbs. He says they are very efficient and they will be kind to your energy bill. And if you want to learn more about Professor Borenstein and see some of his work at the Energy Institute at Haas, you can read his blog at energy@Haas, HAAS.wordpress.com. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope you're feeling a little more hopeful, a little less stuck, and maybe even inspired to take action, because democracy does work when we all participate. And don't forget, sign up for our newsletter to get updates on when our next episode drops. You can go to my website, democracydoes.com. And as a bonus, if you haven't gotten one, a free and easy tip sheet on how to get involved.